Has started.
All right. Our next session is Easier EAD using Airtable and Excel to organize and automate EAD construction. Our presenters for this session are Gretchen Neidhardt and Brie Callahan. Turn it over to the two of them.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Just as a first thing, my partner made the coffee this morning, so if I've got kind of a Don Jr. level of talking speed, please feel free to just ask me to calm down. We will be presenting on Easier EAD using Airtable and Excel to organize and automate EAD construction. And I want to talk about a little bit about why we're doing that. I'll let Gretchen deal with her own situation, but mine is that I am processing a 1,000-box collection at the Art Institute for Tigerman McCurry, which is an architectural firm. And the project is basically huge. So now I have 1,000 boxes, and within that, I have about 750 different architectural projects that they worked on over the years, in addition to their office papers, personal papers, photographs, all kinds of stuff. So what we did first is we were processing the photographs, and I did a lot of those, and then we kept finding more photographs, or I'd learn more information about a project, and I would kind of have to change it up. And I was basically keeping track of everything in Excel, like I've always done with my collections, except that I was winding up having to make changes like 2 and 3 places, and I just knew that I was going to eventually start making mistakes that would be represented in my final finding aid. So I decided to look into a way to manage this in sort of a database situation, but without losing that functionality in Excel. And what I found, hang on, I apparently have to be on the right screen, is Airtable. So if you have spoken with me in the last 2 years, or if indeed you've seen me and Gretchen give this a similar version of this presentation a year or two ago, you may have heard me talk about Airtable, and specifically to say that it is the closest thing to religious conversion that I have ever felt in my life. It is basically a hybrid spreadsheet and database program, and I'm actually going to walk you through it and show you how I've been using it in sort of a stripped down fashion. And then I've also created that same stripped down version of the database that we'll look at today. I've made available for you at this link. The password is Tigerman with a lowercase t, so you'll be able to play around with it and see how all the bits and bobs work together yourself, either now or later. And I should also say that at the end of this, Gretchen and I will let you know about an hour-long lunchtime session that we're going to have next month. So if you have a lot of questions, or if you don't feel like you're ready to have questions yet, but you want to play with it and have some questions down the line, we will be able to have some time to talk you through that later. So yeah, so Airtable works in the cloud. So all of your information is saved onto Airtable servers, which can be a benefit or a disbenefit. I like to do regular downloads and backups myself. However, Airtable also allows you to take snapshots of your base and to also and you can always go back to an earlier version of your base if you want to. So that's a really nice feature as well. It also allows you to collaborate across multiple different users if you want. There is a different fee for each user. You can have lots of different people log into the same account, which is what we do on the rare occasions when we need to do that. But this is, a lot of it is used as sort of like a project management software. So you might have one person who's setting up schedules and another person who's doing like social media content. So that's kind of how those two things work together. So I'm going to actually exit out of this, and then we're going to go look at this base really quick. So I'm just going to talk briefly about how kind of all these pieces come together. So my main problem, as I said, when I was dealing with this collection is that I had 750 different architectural projects, and I was finding out a lot of information about them. This is a great example. Tigerman and McCurry did a lot of work for Acme Studios. They created a bunch of different stuff for them. And originally I was keeping all those things separate, so I was having to keep track of them. Eventually I decided it kind of made more sense to just treat everything they did for Acme as one project. So I created an entry here. So this project master is the totality of everything that I know about what Tigerman and McCurry worked on. So that's everything from this individual residence to this, these guys are non-residential commercial projects. And then I'm able to relate these items to other things in the database that are treated like separate Excel spreadsheets. So for instance, you'll see that each place has a location, and I keep track of those locations in a separate spreadsheet, kind of like you're using a database, but I just find it easier to use. So there, you'll see that I have all of my different locations, and then what's nice is Airtable will actually tell me also how many different things are in Pitkin County, Colorado. I've got Rona Hoffman's residence and also a residence that Stanley and Margaret made for themselves out in that area. And then that loops back to my project masters so that you see them related there as well. And I want to show you a little bit about how that works. So when you start a new column, just like you would in Excel, excuse me, Airtable gives you a lot of different options that you can choose. But what you'll mostly do when you want to relate something to itself is to link to another table. And it gives you a lot of options to do that. I'm not going to go through all this right now because this is just kind of an overview. But the way that this works, I customize my field type. I've asked this to link back to my project master, to this guy over here. And that's why you're seeing that relationship get set up between the two spreadsheets. Again, just like you'd have in a database, but instead of, in Access or kind of some other database programs you've seen where you're drawing lines and moving boxes around, this is just, for me, an easier way to keep those kinds of things related to one another. And one of the other cool things I've been able to do is, so I've got my whole list of projects right here, right? And I have an idea of what I wanted to do when I was dealing with this project is find a way to figure out where everything was that I knew about so that when it came time to process it, because I might have a big house project, for instance, the Holocaust Museum that Stanley built. We have items related to the Holocaust Museum in 50 different boxes. Sometimes they're whole boxes, sometimes they're half a box, sometimes it's just one folder that I used when I found it and I moved it somewhere else. So what I did is I created a separate sheet that tracks every single location that I have. And what I'm able to do, let me go down and I'll add a new entry. So let's say I found, sorry, it's not letting me scroll down here in a good way. So let's say I found a new box that had the Holocaust Museum in it. So what I would do is I'd say, let's say it's RT120, that's a rolled tube. And now what's nice is that this is another one of those lookup fields. So it's going to go back and link to my project master. So all I have to do is start typing. And I've got two things related to the Holocaust. And that then populates in everything else that I've asked it to look up for the Holocaust Museum. And it also adds it to another column that I have here that's a simple one-stop shop of everywhere that this project exists. So it's just a really nice way for me to be able to keep track of everything, everywhere that it is, and make sure that anytime if I'm adding, let's say I decide that the Holocaust Memorial Foundation of Illinois is no longer called that. Let's say I found out more information about it. Let's say instead I wanted to call it the Holocaust Memorial Foundation of Illinois, a shortened version of Illinois. When I go back and look at my projects and with boxes, it has now changed every instance of the Holocaust Memorial Foundation within the whole base to that, so that I'm not having to make multiple changes everywhere. So that's also really convenient when I had things like, I'm sorry, I'm just using filters here. Sometimes when you're starting a project and you don't know where everything is, sorry, these are not actually, I had a bunch of projects where I didn't know where they were located, and that's something that was important to us to be able to identify. So originally, I had about 50 places that were in an unidentified location, but now I'm able to see that I only have 3 that are left, and then I was able to update all of those unidentified locations as real locations in this locations field, and then it just populated across everywhere else too. The other cool thing I've been able to do is actually, I'm doing my most of my, and we'll talk about this when we get to the EAD, I'm actually able to track all of my container level data also here in the spreadsheet. I've asked it to do things for me like auto-generate levels. which is nice to be able to do for that when you're going to work in the EAD. I've asked it to just do a lot of stuff for me, and then I'm able to download this spreadsheet and convert it into the Excel spreadsheet that I need in order to do our EAD conversion. And the last thing I'll show you, because I don't want to get too much into this, you'll be able to play with it on your own. You can see here I'm tracking what different series type they're in, what sub-series, the architect that they're using, or that was in charge of the project. But the other thing that I'm doing, and I've stripped out a few of our series here, so you're only going to see two, is I'm at the end of Tigerman and McCurry, I think I'm going to have about 100 to 200 page finding aid, which isn't that useful for people. So what I'm going to be doing is actually creating an index that shows you, if you want to look at 555 North Michigan, I'm going to show you everywhere in series 1 through 8 where it exists in our collection. And again, I'm able to use these lookup fields to ask it to go into series 1 photos over here. And if it finds something, report it back and put it here. So at the end of this, what I'll be able to do is just download this entire index. I'll be able to download this entire project. I'll be able to download this entire sheet and just represent those index files that I want. So I'm going to have a snapshot of everything, everywhere we have it, that people will be able to use, whether they want to use the finding aid or whether they want to use this index to just kind of be like, okay, I'm just looking for everything from the American Standard Showroom Designer Saturday. I see that it's in box 2.9 in the photograph series, and I see that it's in box 118 in the publication series. So that'll be more useful, obviously, once all of the series are fleshed out, but I just wanted to show you guys a couple of things here. Airtable also has great things where you can do document uploads or file uploads. So now every time we're digitizing something for the collection, I put a derivative here so that it's easy for me to remember what something looks like, and also easy to find those if we need them. So that is what the anti-cruelty building looks like at the corner of Grand and LaSalle. You may have seen it. Stanley designed it in 1982. So that's Airtable. And then what I do is I download this. I will download, like, let's say I'm working with photos. You can then download your, no. Oh, I think that this is because this is the one I'm sharing. It's not letting me download. But you can then download as a CSV from any of the different tabs in your base. You can download those as a CSV and then convert it into an Excel spreadsheet. And then you do have to do some work to work with your data to make it ready for putting into Excel as a useful experience, because Airtable does things like anytime there's a comma, like for instance, we looked at with the Holocaust Museum. Just one second here. Anywhere there's a comma, like there is in the Holocaust Museum, it's going to add quotes around it. So you do have to do some data cleanup, and I'm going to show you a little bit what the end result of that looks like. You should be seeing an Excel screen right now, I believe. So this is after my data cleanup, and what you can see is that I get it into a position where I have my levels, I've got my box folders.
I don't think we can see your Excel sheet, and I don't know if that is
Excel sheet?
I don't know if that is just me.
Oh, no, okay.
Oh, there we go. All right.
You can see it now? Okay, sorry, I shared it on one screen and then I moved it to another screen.
That's okay.
So yeah, you can see that I've got my levels here. Those will become my CO4s and CO5s. I've got my different kinds of boxes, including internal audiences. I've got my box and folder numbers. I've got my folder titles. I've got all my required and optional fields. And all I need to do at that point is start to turn it into EAD. And I think for that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick. I'm going to share something different so that you guys can see this again. Are you seeing Chrome again? Are you seeing our presentation again?
Now I am seeing your presentation.
Okay, great. So yeah, I use Airtable to keep my entire project together in one place with a little bit more flexibility than I've found some databases work for me in the past. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen, which means I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you're going to see it start to share again right away with the exact same content.
All right, let's see how smooth I can make this. Oh, not smooth enough. While I am opening my system preferences to allow me to do this, I do want to say that Oh no. Brie, I might have to ask you, shoot. Okay, I should have tested this out ahead of time. It wants me to
I
uh
got it.
you got it? Okay.
Yeah. Just
This
say
is
next.
well, this is going to be interesting when I want to share my spreadsheet. So actually, I might email that to you really quickly if you don't mind
Sure.
sharing for me.
That's fine.
Okay. But while I am doing that, like I said, I do just want to quickly acknowledge the predecessors. So Bree and I started working on this project when she was working with us at Chicago History Museum for I believe you may have started with this on something else, but we were working on the Rayburn Fleurlage collection,
Hmm.
which he was a photographer and he photographed like a lot of street scenes, a lot of blues, folk music, festivals, etc. Um, and we had decided, I think we were going to inventory this most mini series down to the item level. So we knew we were in for like a really, really, really large finding aid.
Hmm.
um, and the
I
folks who
hand
had,
coded like 6,000 lines, I think, before we discovered this.
oh no, the left sides of the slides are cut off. Uh-oh. Um, so yeah, so it was going to be a huge endeavor. And what we had too were also, we had an Excel inventory. So we
Hmm.
were pretty well set with knowing what we had. Um, let's see. Actually, Bree, could I ask you to open when I ask you to open the Excel template I have in our Google folder?
Yes, let
But-
me
Okay.
find that.
Um,
Um,
but anyway, so yeah, so we knew that we had a lot of EAD we wanted to process. We mostly at CHM, the process we had done was either, like Bree said, hand coding or using a template already built in Oxygen um, to put things into a form. But it was still a pretty painstaking, like one at a time process. And then our methodology at CHM is we add those things to Content DM, and that displays our EAD finding aids. I know others have different systems. So when I was hunting around for a solution to this, what we found was something that was very kindly posted online with a lot of documentation by Matt Herbison and Holly Jo Mingle from Paxil. And they had created this specifically for Archivist Toolkit, but EAD is EAD, and it was going to work for us still. We just didn't necessarily use some of the Archivist Toolkit admin fields. And we linked to their original guide here. So a copy of these slides is in our open Google folder that we'll share at the end. So you can take a look at that if you want to. Um, and Bree, could you go to the next slide?
yes.
Thanks. So like I said, for the way we have used this, it's primarily been for collections with larger content lists where we wanted to wrangle that. We at CHM, so Bree started this with us, and we've kind of diverged on our strategies for using this. And I still am not quite. I use Airtable for other things, not necessarily for this kind of thing yet, because a lot of what we're doing is working with legacy finding aids. So we're actually maybe copying and pasting things in from former Word documents or content lists, etc. So I work with this primarily just in Excel. And the two things you have to know is you may have to do some math. I think we've done most of the math for you, but that was probably the most difficult part for me to wrap my head around. I'll show you on the spreadsheet itself in a second. But the so the way that this Excel program takes your contents lists and it uses formulas to wrap it in your EAD tags that you indicate that you want to use. But then it uses math and nesting to determine how to close those tags. So particularly closing out the container tags in the appropriate way so everything's correctly nested. The more levels of container you have, the more complicated the math gets. We've done it, I think I have one that goes up to 4 levels, and Bree's example that she uses goes up to 5. So unless you are approaching higher levels than that, we should have you covered. If you do go more than that, let us know. We would love to know. Um, the other thing about this that I think you have to be fairly comfortable with is looking at Excel formulas. So the way that we have set up the sheet is there's a fairly simple data entry part. I often, separate this sheet out completely and just so somebody accidentally doesn't, alter a formula or something like that. Because we often have, classes coding or legacy finding aids, or it's maybe someone who hasn't worked a lot in Excel. And I, I don't want anything getting altered. Um, so the data entry sheet is pretty straightforward, but then the formula building really happens in another sheet that pulls in all that raw data. Um, let's see. And then the last thing I would say, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is the one bug in this that we haven't quite been able to fully figure out is closing out, at least for me, is closing out the very last tag. Because some of the math is built on whatever thing is coming next. So it'll look, so if you have a folder and then it sees that the next thing is a series, it'll appropriately code that. But if you don't have anything else, if it's just a series level description and you don't have anything under that, the math gets confused. So it doesn't know where to stop. So I would always suggest both checking the very last thing, but also always, running your XML you end up with through an XML validator, whether that's Oxygen or like an online one through W3 Schools or something like that. So I think next is sharing the Excel spreadsheet.
Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, perfect. So again, this will look a little bit different from Bree's, and we'll have both of these posted. So, take what you want from this. We encourage you to spend some time exploring and then definitely come back with questions. But the way that I have designed and continue to refine the sheet that we use, so this is your data entry page. I try to be pretty clear about what columns someone should actually be entering text into and which ones they should not. So green is, it's going to take the information you've entered and it's going to enter something else based on that. So for instance, in the level column, you are putting in the container code level and it will automatically, this pulls from the constant sheet. And yeah, it'll change it to be whatever you have decided. And you can change these. Yeah, Brie, if you want to go to constants, we can show you where that is. So you can change these as well. And it'll totally do that.
Oops. Now you can see it's changed to a squirrel over there. I'm going to be more serious.
And then, so if you go back to the container list data entry really quickly, I just want to point out a couple other things. I really like Excel formulas and conditional ones. So what I've also done here to try to make it clear, because you're entering every single thing, whether it's a series, info, a subseries, a box title, as if it's the same kind of hierarchical level of text. And I think that can be a little bit confusing, particularly if then for some of them, you're supposed to then enter a box number or a folder number. So that's why in these instance columns, I have used like a conditional formula that says, if it says there's a box, please enter a box number. And that's where those come from. And yeah, exactly. And this is, so like I said, this is the basics of what we tend to do for any container level in our finding aids. You can certainly add other fields as needed. But then, yeah, Brie, if you'll go over to EAD building, then I can show you how it all gets put together. So this looks kind of scary sometimes. If you'll click on like column D2 or cell D2, you can see what that formula looks like. So it's literally just pulling your information from that container list data entry sheet. So if you change it there, it'll automatically change it in that EAD building column. You don't have to refresh anything unless you're changing a formula.
Yeah, ideally don't mess with this.
Yes. And if you do mess with it, if you want to click on the date code construction,
Say that again. Date code
the
construction.
yeah, and down one so you can see the formula. This is my masterpiece. It is horrible. And I have it like written out in the next slide too, so you can see it there. But essentially why this one is so crazy is because I'm trying to also build all the attributes of the unit date tag. Yeah, this has been like, I won't say sleepless nights, but I've definitely thought about it more than I want to admit. But this is also where I would give you the advice that if you want to mess with any of your formulas, for the love of God, copy them out and put them in a text editor and mess with them there,
Yeah.
and not here, because you'll never find your way back. And part of the reason this looks also so complicated is it's predicated on a lot of like, if you have two dates, therefore a date range, then, say this is inclusive. Or if you have one date, when you're putting in your normal attribute, don't put a slash after it. It's just got all these kinds of if then. So you'll use like an if is blank all the time, because if you use that, then your EAD won't populate if nothing's there. So if you're not using every field every time, that makes it a lot easier to then be like, okay, there's nothing here. I'm just going to ignore it, not do some wonky Excel thing that's like, you asked me to do something I can't do, so I'm going to put some crazy text in here. The other thing that I use all the time for this is you'll see it up here is trim. And if you haven't used that function, I love it. All it does is it trims any leading or ending spaces from the text you're pulling from. So I know I often have a habit of like maybe putting a space after a word or something like that. So it just takes all that out so you don't have any of that extra stuff in your code. And Brie, if you'll page over to the building the whole kind of line, so this is what you end up with. And if you click on one, you'll see another crazy formula that's building this. So it's saying, pull these tags from the top column and then pull the content from each row in. And you can either copy and paste directly from here. I don't necessarily recommend that. Oh, I guess while we're here too, I'll also point out really quickly, these AQ and AR columns are where you're building out what container, like you're nesting containers. So I don't remember all the math exactly off the top of my head, but it essentially it's concatenating the thing that's in AQ right below it with the one that's in AR kind of diagonally above it. So that's how it knows then what to close out the tags as. And that's also, yeah, if you want to go to constants, that data is also there. I did it like once a long time ago to build out all that math, and I haven't done it since. I don't fully recommend it, although it's fun if you like want to return to your algebra roots for a little while. But the other place I would say, so we've always kept this EAD result to copy tab, and that's where all your stuff gets placed too. So this is a much easier and like clearer place to copy and paste all of your EAD to then put into whatever kind of system you're using. And it'll just paste in as raw text. And again, like you said, I think 30 is the last one. If you scroll down to that, you'll see that even though it's the last thing, it's not properly closed out. I guess part of what you could do is always just put in a dummy series 1 at the very end, and in theory that would do it, and just don't copy that very last one. Or if I just tried to remember. And also XML, like I said, an XML validator will alert you if you haven't done what it wanted you to do. Let's see. I think I went over most of that. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we do have a couple other slides, but we sort of just shared that. So you can feel free to look at the slides later. We kind of shared what the formulas are and stuff in the slides.
Yeah, the only other thing I would caution about, which I didn't think about at first and then had to go back and change a bunch of stuff the first round of this, was to think also carefully when you're building your whole line, or your nested set of XML for one item, is to think about what goes inside and outside the descriptive ID tag. So I think it's access restrictions for us that goes outside of it that we often use, especially if it's image material. So just making sure you've built that out correctly. I find you can put in your data entry part of your Excel database, you can put that in whatever order you want, as long as you just remember to pull it from specific places. I like to kind of keep it in the same order that the tags are going to go in, because that just visually helps me. But in theory, you could have it wherever. All right, and I think Brie is now when I hand it back over to you to talk about macros.
Yeah. So all of the stuff that Gretchen just talked about is very complicated. And as with her, I about 2 years ago redid the math so that I could make my particular things that we're recording work. The things that we record are slightly less complicated than what CHM records, especially for Tigerman McCurry, just because we were doing a super MPLP thing for this. But I also wanted to make it out so that, obviously, like, I clicked through a lot of things on the, I just want to make sure this is the right one. Yeah. Obviously, I clicked through a lot of things on the, we looked at the EAD building and the constants and all this stuff.
We're not seeing your screen. I'm sorry to interrupt, Brie. I think you might be on the other monitor again.
Oh, okay. Hang on one second. I thought it was sharing. Please hold. Share screen. It should be. Are you seeing?
We can see you.
You can see me now. Can you see it?
I'm still seeing just.
I think it might
screen.
be because How about now?
There we go. Now I can see it.
Okay, sorry. If I don't have the Excel screen up, then you can't look at it. So I also went through and did the math, and I have done the math now to the point where I don't need to do math for any of the rest of our collections. Like, I have it built out so that whether it's a simple collection or a complex collection, you can do your data entry here in your contained data entry list, and it should all, it's all going to go do the EAD building like it does. It has all of its math. It's fine. The constants are fine. So I wanted to make this, and you get all your stuff. But so I created myself a template. So, but what happens is that sometimes, like, you kind of just got to do a lot of repetitive activities after you've added in your all your data. You got to do one of the fills all the way down, and a copy and a fill all the way down, so that it's correctly populating the subseries and the files and the items and all that stuff. And I am a person who will do 80 steps and then forget step 81, and it messes up. So I was like, okay, let me just see if I can do something else. So what I did is I just created a macro that does something pretty simple, which is like do all those little tasks that I just talked about. And we can step into the macro. Are you seeing that? But are you seeing the macro?
Right now it's just a gray screen.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's not get into the macro then. Because I don't know how to share a sub.
It's a very cloudy macro.
I don't know how to share a subscreen underneath an Excel spreadsheet. So all a macro is you hit record, and then you take a series of actions within Excel, and then you hit stop. And if you run the macro again, it just recreates those actions for you. So all I did was I created a little macro that if I'm entering in data here and I change it, so like let's say I change this from a 4 to a 3, it's changed over, which is great, but sometimes Excel gets a little confused and I just needed to clean up my data. So instead what I do is when I'm done entering data here, I just run my macro, and not only does it do all the little actions that I need to do, it also takes me right to the EAD results to copy, because I don't want volunteers or interns or people who aren't messing with this to not be messing with it. So I didn't want them to wind up on the EAD building screen or the constant screen or anything like that. I just want them to do their data entry, and then they get to, basically you get to enter data, you run the macro, and then you pick up the finished EAD. And that has worked really well for me. And then you can just copy all the way down, as you can see. I have lots. This is just one sub-series of series one in my collection. And then I just pick everything else up and I drop it into Oxygen. Like Gretchen was talking about, you do have to validate because it sometimes forgets to close out to a series one, or like this one is trying to leave it at the file level. So all I need to do is when I put it into Oxygen, I just close out to the sub-series level and I keep it moving. So this is really great if you have a template that you want to use, but people enter new data, just to make sure that it's all clean and accurate as it should be. Gretchen, I think at this point we are going to hand it back over to you to talk about just like some final steps. I need to learn how to share the screen a little bit more fast.
I mean, okay. I was gonna say we've talked about most of them.
Yeah.
Which saying, there's multiple places where your final EAD shows up. You can also there is a tab I think in both of ours still that we've left in from the original spreadsheet we downloaded from Paxil that has a place to put in your your admin stuff at the top. I don't think we've ever used that to build
No.
like a finding aid completely from scratch with this, but you could. There's no reason not to.
You definitely could.
Yeah, it's just when it's just a one-to-one thing, it hasn't quite seemed worth it. I mentioned we've been using this quite a bit with legacy finding aids too. That it's not, you can just like copy and paste the whole thing in and then do a fair amount of like finagling within your data entry spreadsheet. But for that, I would say you'd need to be pretty comfortable with like readjusting any formulas. So I would suggest, pasting in a chunk at a time, which is not quite as fast as pasting everything in, but still faster than retyping everything.
And that's when you might need to do that data cleanup just to make, and the downfill just to make sure that it's all populating in as it should.
Yes. I will say I have done, I saw Virginia asked a question of how do we learn to do this? And that's a great question. I don't know if I remember. I mean, I feel like Google is my best Excel friend, and I have had to do a lot with like batch edits and looking at like maybe lots of MARC records that I've exported into Excel. I'm a big Excel fan. I use it a lot. It can be terrible. It always wants to make everything a date. It's very annoying, but I will say I have rarely been let down by just Googling some variation of like, how do I do this thing in Excel? And there's usually a lot of things that pop up. But I've usually been able to find what I was looking for. As Brie was very nice about it. For whatever reason, macros still elude me. I just like have a mental block about them. So I tend to just, if I need to like populate a whole formula for a whole column or something, I do often Google how do I highlight the whole column, which I think is space shift, I'm pretty sure. Although I might still be misremembering that. But I tend to do some of that manually. And yeah, and Allison mentioned the Mr. Excel form can be really helpful. I found it to be a really powerful tool for working with metadata, since so often you're needing to treat the same like chunk of metadata in the same way.
For me, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh no, go ahead, Brie.
For me, I would say it took me a couple of days to get all the kinks worked out with my formula, and it was a lot of trial and error and like copying and pasting stuff into Word and then pasting it back into Excel and creating like, hitting F12 and saving like 4 different versions of it so that I could see if what I was doing was working. However, it has saved me literally hundreds of hours of hand coding like 5,000 lines of 5,000 easily different entries into EAD. So if you are working with big collections, or if you're like trying to transform old finding aids into EAD, it is worth the time to spend with this to just the idea that I can like enter data into an Excel spreadsheet and then get EAD out of it is like been life-changing for me. So.
And I will also, that's one of the reasons we wanted to present is I'm sure that there will still be individual needs for every institution and repository, but I think we've done a lot of the big background work, and we're happy to like talk to you all too if there is anything that's different that's not working for you. But we hope we can, deliver this and this will be easy for many people. I know there's other solutions to,
Hmm.
there's programming stuff you can do to automate this. That is not part of my current skill set.
Oh,
Um,
not mine.
and yeah, so there's lots of ways to get at this problem. This is something that's worked really well for both of us, and we hope might work well for some of you all too.
Yeah. And so, we've talked for longer than we intended to because we're sort of like evangelical about this, but we figured what might be easier is to give you guys a couple of weeks to like play with it if these are interesting things to you. So we've got a public folder with both of our templates that we've used for our two institutions. The Airtable demo, you should be seeing this now, is also up there, which you can totally play with. You won't be able to enter data like I did, but you should be able to like view and move things around and filter. And then on November 12th, we will be available for a lunch hour Google meeting so that if you do have questions or if you want to like try to talk with us or troubleshoot, we'll be available to do that too. But if you're just like, I don't understand, we can also feel free to contact us and we'll do what we can.
And I'm
Oh,
just
great.
pasting
Very
this
smart
in,
to put it in the
so
chat as well.
it's
Nice.
just easier for people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm not, we're happy to submit our slides as well. I'm not sure if
for sure.
they're in our Google Drive, but I don't know if they'll be up somewhere else too after the conference.
Well, if you want to send them to me, I can see about posting it maybe with the recording.
Sure.
And thank you for putting the links in. I was just going to ask if you could do that because you can't copy and paste if you're viewing the slides.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you guys could click or not. So.
Awesome. Thank you. There was one question back in the chat. Has Airtable been used for creating institutional finding aids, or is it mostly just for, oops, just lost that. Lost the question. Is it used for creating institutional finding aids or mostly just for internal project management?
For
Public
internal
finding aids,
project
that is.
management. And like I said, I have to do a lot of data cleanup when I download this. It's because it's in a CSV. Always make sure that if you are importing something into Excel, that you make sure that you take your box numbers and make sure they show up as text so that your 5.10 doesn't become a 5.1. That's just a thing. But yeah, so I'm just using it to manage all my projects. Like I said, I've got 750 different architectural projects that I need to manage in addition to like all the other stuff. So for me, it's just been about management. And then I do the bulk of my actual like container list data. Like I do the thing that helps me get to my container list data entry stuff. I do that all in Excel.
Yeah, I would just echo Brie on any time you are opening, because I think there's an option when you're opening either like a text file or CSV file in Excel to click like treat as text, not as,
Yes.
general. Um,
You
that
should
is my,
import your data.
yeah.
Data import. Don't just open it. That's my that's my pro tip for Excel for the day.
And yeah, I would say I also like I do this all the time and I tell all the folks I work with that work in Excel to do the same thing. Any data entry columns you're dealing with, always make sure those are formatted as straight up text because yeah, you'll lose those trailing zeros. Something
Yep.
will turn into a date that you don't want to. So Excel is
Excel
a
is
total
always trying to
mystery.
Really
do
great
a little.
advice.
Yeah, Excel could always just do a little bit less. Just trust me, Excel, that I know what I'm up to.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any other questions from attendees? That was a really terrific presentation. I'm looking forward to exploring some of those. It's a little
It's,
overwhelming. I am not
yeah,
like I have Excel fear and
yeah.
anxiety, and it's just yeah.
And that's why we wanted to give people time to play with it before we were like, what are your questions? Because like if you just showed me this like big ass formula, I'd just be like, okay, well, I have to go and disappear from the planet now. So so please feel free to play with it. And we for our sins like kind of love this thing. So like we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions? All right, well, if you think of anything, post it to the chat. Make sure that the presenters get them. I believe we have an announcement to make Dan, I think, had an announcement about an upcoming session.
Yeah, it's actually an announcement about a service that the Chicago Area Archivist is offering. It's a new pilot program for resume review, and I'll put the link to one of our announcements into the chat. But what this is an opportunity for those who'd like to strengthen their resume, and also an opportunity for our colleagues in the Chicago Area Archivist to volunteer to review other people's resume. And there are two ways you can participate. You can participate, you can volunteer, as I said, to read resumes, and you could also submit your resume. We're primarily focused on people who'd like guidance on preparing for a job, but we're also but you can participate regardless at what stage of your career you're at. If you're new to the field, or if maybe you're just need to update some things on your end. I will say that we'll do our best to keep your resume and the review process anonymous, and to keep everybody anonymous, but we cannot 100% guarantee that, and I just want to say that up front. As of this Wednesday, we've had 4 people volunteer already to review resumes, and 6 resumes have been submitted. So if you're interested, I have that link there in the chat, and you could also contact my colleague on the steering committee, Ashley, who's been doing the lion's share of the work on preparing this service, and that email address is caaresumereview@gmail.com. Again, that's caaresumereview@ga.com or gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And that's pretty much the announcement.
All right, I'm going to stop our recording.